Hello, today we're going to be talking about applying for the PMP exam with reference to how to fill in your PMP application form with all the information about the projects that you've worked on. Those of you who are in the process of doing this know that it can be quite a task, especially when you're made to fill in all the different projects that you've worked on with the different hours you might have worked in initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling and closing. And furthermore, you've even got more detail that you need to complete in the application form. So let's look at the application form. You can see the URL at the top. If you click on the PMP Application Form link, it opens up the application form. We're actually looking at page 4 on that form, and page 4 has to do with experience verification. You verifying your experience as a project manager. On that page, you can see that specific reference is made to how to account for the hours you've worked. If you've got a project, project 1, and a project, project 2, running concurrently, let's say over a 3-month period, you are not allowed to say, I worked on project 1 for 3 months, that's 3 months worth of work, and I worked on project 2 for 3 months, and that's another 3 months. So I've worked average of 6 months. No. Those two projects actually amount just to 3 months worth of project work. So if you've got overlapping projects, you're not allowed to double count that time. Going down to the next section, we can see all PMs or anyone who intends taking this exam needs to break down the experience to this fine detail. First of all, you've got a project number. We could call it project 01. If you've got 10 projects you've worked on, you need to photocopy this form and have 10 pages worth of information for all the projects you've worked on. So for project 01, for example, under initiating, in the initiating process group, you're meant to account for the time that you've spent in initiating, taking note of these different subcomponents. Conduct project selection methods to evaluate the feasibility of new products or services. So what PMI wants you to do is to say, on this project, project 01, under the initiating process group, I worked on conducting project selection methods to evaluate the feasibility of new products for XYZ number of hours, or 123 number of hours. They also want you to say, I identified key stakeholders and performed analysis to gain buy-in and requirements for the success of this project for this number of hours, and so on. So you can see initiating, you're meant to do that for the initiating process and all the other process groups. So the initiating process group is divided into these subcomponents by PMI, and they want you to account for all the hours that you've spent performing these sub-component activities. That could be a rather challenging task for people who don't keep records, but I have devised a very easy way of coming to grips with how much time you might have actually spent on the projects you've worked on. So this is the form that you're meant to fill out. Keep this at the back of your mind while we look at the other document that will enable you to fill out all this information. The new document I want you to look at is what I've called the PMP Application Check. What the PMP Application Check form will enable you to do is find out how many hours you spent on each process group in a project. So let's take, for example, our project 01. Let's call it project 01, which we fill in here. And then we need to think about our start date. What was the start date that we started working on project 01? We started working on project 01, let's say 1st of January 2001. What the PMP Application Check form enables you to do is find out how many number of hours you spent on each process group in the project. Let's take project 01 for example. Type in the title of the project, type in the project start date. You started on 1st of January 2001, and the finish date of the project was 1st of January 2008. Now you can see that the number of days you spent on the project has been calculated as 2,556 days, 365.14 weeks, and a total number of hours, 14,606, was spent on the project. The next thing you need to do to enable you calculate all the detail that you need to calculate for these subcomponents that PMI wants is for you to ask yourself, how much time did I spend on initiating? You as a project manager should be able to say, I didn't even do much in initiating on this project. I came in the planning process. So think about the project you worked on. If you actually did spend time doing lots of the work in initiating, such as, let me zoom in here. You can see conduct project selection methods, that's part of initiating, identify key stakeholders, and perform analysis, that's part of initiating, define the scope of the project, and so on. So you need to ask yourself, what percentage of my time did I actually spend doing initiating type work? Or what percentage of my time did I spend doing planning? So you've got 100% making up the whole project that you worked on between 1st of January 2001 to 1st of January 2008. Now you need to ask yourself, what percentage of my time was spent on initiating? Let's say you as a project manager came in rather late in initiating, and let's say you spent about 15% of your time doing initiating work. If you spent 15% of your time doing initiating work, and the total number of hours was 14,606, the calculation immediately shows you that you've spent 2,190 hours thereabouts doing initiating type work. The moment you fill in the percentage that you spent performing initiating work, if you move to the next tab, you'll find that that number of hours has been carried over to the next tab, because that will enable you calculate in further detail how much time you spent doing the different subcomponents that PMI is asking for. Now, this could look like a very tedious way of doing it, but it's better than guesswork. You definitely want to make sure that whatever you put down on paper can be backed up with documentation. And also, you want to have a reference point just in case you're audited to show your supervisors from time gone by what your rationale was for putting in that number of hours into your form. So we're done with initiating for Project 01, which is our demo project. Now let's think about planning. How much time did we spend planning? Have at the back of your mind that majority of the project manager's time is spent planning the project. That's where a lot of the work is done. In fact, planning can go all the way from beginning to the end because you're iteratively putting back outputs that you might have gotten from the different process groups back into the planning process group. You plan how to do the project, then you execute it, then of course you monitor and control it because it's not perfect and things are bound to go wrong. Based on your monitoring and controlling and based on your executing, you might have recommended corrective actions or recommended preventive actions. You might even need to plan your project all over again based on what you've discovered in executing and monitoring and controlling. So you go back to the drawing board and you plan based on the activities today. This is how we are going to continue and finish the remainder of the project. So planning